The bobcat first appeared at the far corner of the soccer field just after sunrise, standing beside the orange corner flag as if it had wandered out of the woods by mistake and then forgotten how to leave. At first, nobody paid much attention. The field at Maple Ridge Community Park sat on the edge of a small suburban town in eastern Tennessee, bordered on one side by a line of pines and on the other by a chain-link fence that separated the grass from a drainage gully and a patch of scrubby, undeveloped land. Deer sometimes crossed there at dawn. Stray dogs had been seen near the parking lot before. A fox had once trotted across the field so fast that half the children thought it was someone's pet. So when one of the early arriving parents pointed toward the far corner and said, "There's some kind of cat out there," most people assumed it would vanish the moment the first whistle blew, but it didn't. The bobcat stayed exactly where it was, near the corner flag in the northeast end of the field, ears high, body tense, tail short and rigid. It was a lean young female, mottled tawny and gray, with black ear tufts and bright, watchful eyes that seemed fixed not on the people beginning to arrive, but on the fence line just beyond the corner arc. Every few seconds it would pace a small half circle in the grass, stop near the flag, then turn toward the chain-link fence and stare at one specific spot low to the ground. Then it would turn back toward the field again, as if checking whether anyone had noticed. Coach Ryan Mercer noticed. Ryan was 38, broad-shouldered, patient, and known among the parents of Maple Ridge United's under-11 team as the kind of coach who remembered every kid's favorite position, carried extra water bottles in his trunk, and could fix a broken shin guard strap with athletic tape and a car key. He had played college soccer years earlier, but these days his Saturday mornings belonged to youth league schedules, bright cones, folding chairs, and trying to convince 10-year-olds that passing was more fun than dribbling through 5 defenders. That morning he had arrived early, as always, with a mesh bag of balls over one shoulder and a clipboard tucked under his arm. The first thing he saw was not the dew on the turf or the lines needing a touch of chalk near midfield. It was the bobcat at the corner flag. He stopped dead on the sideline. Several parents standing by the bleachers noticed his expression and turned to look. Someone let out a low, startled laugh. Another parent immediately pulled out a phone. The children naturally were thrilled. Half of them started inching toward the far touchline until Ryan snapped back into motion and raised his voice sharply. "Everybody back from that end of the field. Now! No one goes near the corner." The authority in his tone worked. Kids stopped. Parents looked suddenly less entertained. Assistant coach Denise Cole, who had been unlocking the equipment bin by the benches, came over and followed his line of sight. "Is that a bobcat?" she asked quietly. Ryan nodded. "Looks like it." Denise, who taught 4th grade during the week and had a sharper sense for trouble than most people gave her credit for, folded her arms tightly. "Why isn't it leaving?" That was the part Ryan could not answer. The bobcat was not acting cornered. It had a clear line to the woods beyond the drainage strip, an easy escape route through the scrub, and more than enough reason to avoid a growing crowd of humans. Yet it remained near the same patch of fence at the field's corner, pacing 3 or 4 steps at a time, then returning to sniff low near the base of the chain link. Once it placed both forepaws against the fence and peered through toward the brush beyond. Then it dropped back to the grass and looked toward the people again, with an intensity Ryan found more unsettling than aggression would have been. Aggression made sense. This felt purposeful. He told Denise to keep the kids near midfield and called park security, though both of them knew the town's Saturday response time for wildlife wasn't going to be instant. The dispatcher promised to send someone from animal control when available, which in local government language could mean 15 minutes or an hour, depending on what else was going wrong in town. Ryan was about to call the league director too when the bobcat suddenly moved again, quickly this time, straight to the fence, where it lowered its head and pawed at something near the bottom rail. "Wait," Denise said sharply. "Did you see that?" Ryan had. There, just below the chain link near the corner flag, something about the fence looked wrong. One section of lower wire was bent outward, and the vertical support tension near the post seemed twisted, as though the mesh had been pulled or broken recently. From where he stood, he could not see clearly through the dew-heavy grass in the angle of the slope. But the bobcat could. It paced to the fence, pawed near the damaged section, then backed away and made a low, rough sound, almost like a broken cough or a raspy call. The hairs on Ryan's arms lifted despite the mild morning air. Denise stepped closer beside him. "That's not random." "No," Ryan said quietly. "It's not." More parents were gathering now, murmuring, some curious, some nervous, all trying to understand why the game had not started. Children bounced on their toes, asking questions all at once. "Can we pet it? Is it going to attack? Is it somebody's cat?" Ryan did not take his eyes off the corner. "Everyone stay behind the halfway line," he called. "Parents, too. Please." The bobcat moved again to the bent fence and pressed its nose low into the grass. Then for the first time, Ryan heard it. A tiny sound. So faint he almost thought it came from one of the kids behind him. But then it came again. Thin, scratchy, and muffled by wire and grass. Denise heard it too because she grabbed his forearm without looking away. "There's something there." Ryan was already moving. He did not run straight at the bobcat. He angled wide along the sideline. Careful, hands visible. Body turned slightly so as not to look like a direct threat. The bobcat saw him coming and retreated only a few yards into the corner of the field, just enough to give space while still keeping the damaged section of fence in full view. It did not bolt. It did not hide. It watched him with a tautness that looked almost unbearable. Up close, the problem revealed itself instantly. The chain link at the bottom corner had been broken in a jagged V shape, where one tie wire had snapped and the mesh had bent outward toward the drainage strip. Perhaps a maintenance mower had caught it days earlier. Perhaps someone had climbed through. Either way, the opening created a narrow gap between the fence and the steel tension bar. Wedged partly under the bent mesh, caught where the wire had curled inward against the post, was a bobcat kitten. Ryan's breath left him in a rush. It was tiny, much smaller than he would have guessed from a distance. Its spotted coat was dusty and damp with dew, one foreleg pinned awkwardly under the twisted lower mesh, while the rest of its body crouched in the grass on the outside of the fence. It must have slipped halfway through from the drainage side and gotten trapped when the bent chain link flexed back. Every time it tried to pull free, the broken wire bit tighter across its shoulder and palm. Its eyes were huge with fear. When Ryan crouched, it made a weak, cracked cry that went straight through him. Behind him, Denise had reached the end line and stopped short. "Oh my God!" Everything that had seemed bizarre now made terrible, perfect sense. The mother had found the kitten trapped at daybreak, had tried and failed to free it, and when cars and people began arriving at the field, she had done the one thing left that might bring help. She had stayed where humans could not ignore her, right next to the corner flag, in the most visible place on the field. Ryan stood and turned back toward the crowd. "Nobody comes down here," he said louder and harder than before. "There's a trapped kitten in the fence." The change in the group was immediate. Children fell silent. Parents who had been casually filming lowered their phones. One father began moving everyone farther back without being asked. Denise was already on the phone with 911 and animal control, explaining rapidly that there was a wildlife entrapment at the soccer field and that they needed assistance now, not later. But Ryan could see the kitten weakening by the second. The broken wire had trapped the foreleg high enough that if the kitten panicked harder, it could do serious damage. Worse, the bottom of the mesh was tangled in the grass stems and anchored tight against the post. If he left it alone for 15 or 20 minutes waiting for official help, the kitten might thrash itself bloody or go into shock. He looked toward the mother bobcat, who stood maybe 15 yards away near the corner flag, body low, eyes burning, every muscle visibly pulled between fear and need. "I'm going to free it," he said. Denise looked up sharply. "Ryan, that is a wild bobcat." He nodded once. "I know." One of the dads, Mark Evans, jogged over from the bench area carrying a multi-tool and a pair of work gloves from his truck before Ryan even asked. Mark was an electrician, practical and steady, and one quick glance through the fence was enough. "Need cutters?" Ryan said yes at the same time Denise said, "Wait." The bobcat mother made the same rough, urgent sound from the flag corner, and all three adults turned toward her. She did not move closer. She only stood there, staring at the fence gap. Mark exhaled slowly. "She wants us to open it." No one argued. The next minute felt stretched thin with tension. Ryan pulled on the gloves. Mark handed him the multi-tool with the wire cutters unfolded. Denise positioned herself a few yards behind them, ready to shout if the mother charged or if the children drifted too close. Ryan crouched at the fence, trying to make his movements small and predictable. The kitten flattened itself instantly, terrified, its tiny body trembling. "Easy, buddy," Ryan murmured before realizing how absurd it was to talk to a wildcat like a nervous puppy. But the voice helped him keep his own hand steady, so he kept doing it. "Easy. I'm not hurting you." The broken chain link had curled into a hooked loop around the kitten's foreleg. Ryan had to slide the cutter nose between fur and metal without nicking skin. The first snip clipped only a tie wire and loosened the mesh slightly. The kitten squealed and jerked. Denise gasped behind him. The mother bobcat sprang 3 steps forward, stopped hard, and let out a deep, rattling cry that froze everyone in place. Ryan went still and looked up. The bobcat's ears were flattened now, body coiled, but she did not come farther. She held herself there, as if something stronger than terror kept dragging her back from the edge. "I'm trying," Ryan said, and later he would not know whether he meant the words for himself, the kitten, or the mother. He cut again. This time the bent wire gave more cleanly, releasing pressure across the trapped leg. Mark knelt beside him and took hold of the loose mesh to keep it from springing back. "One more," he said. Ryan nodded. The final section was wrapped around a grass root and the post base. He clipped the wire, yanked the grass free, and suddenly the whole lower corner of the chain link sagged outward. The kitten stumbled halfway loose but caught for one awful second at the shoulder. Ryan slid both gloved hands under its chest and hips and lifted. It came free all at once. The kitten was shockingly light, all trembling bones, oversized paws, and dusty spotted fur. One foreleg dangled stiffly for a moment before curling weakly back under the body. Ryan backed away from the fence instantly, heart hammering, and lowered the kitten onto the grass inside the field about 6 feet from the gap. He did not dare set it on the outer side near the mother, while the broken mesh still lay loose and sharp. The kitten gave a ragged cry and tried to stand, failing twice before collapsing onto its belly. Then the mother moved. She did not attack the humans. She came straight to the bent section of fence, saw the opening widened, and in one fluid motion slipped through into the field. A collective gasp rose from the parents. Several children squeaked in fear and were hurried even farther back. Ryan and Mark backed away at once, hands visible, bodies turned aside. The mother bobcat crossed the corner grass in 3 silent bounds and reached the kitten. For a second, she only stood over it, rigid with focus. Then she lowered her head and began licking the kitten furiously. Face, ears, neck, shoulder, the injured foreleg, over and over with the speed of something counting survival by touch. The kitten answered with tiny cracked cries and pushed its head against her chest. Denise had tears in her eyes. She was not the only one. No one spoke. Even the children had gone quiet now, sensing somehow that this was no longer merely exciting, but important in a way they did not have words for. Ryan stood a dozen yards away, chest still pounding, watching a wild mother gather her baby back from a chain-link fence on a suburban soccer field, while orange cones, bench bags, and half-inflated balls sat uselessly under the brightening sky. It felt like 2 worlds had collided without warning. The problem was not fully over, though. When the mother tried to lift the kitten by the scruff, it cried sharply and sagged on the sore foreleg. She stopped immediately, licked it again, and tried a different grip. Same result. The kitten could not brace properly. Ryan looked at Denise. Denise looked at him. Mark, still holding the useless multi-tool, said quietly, "What now?" Animal control was 10 minutes out, maybe less. 10 minutes suddenly felt possible now that the kitten was no longer pinned, but only if the mother stayed. Ryan feared that any movement from the crowd or a child's sudden shout might send her fleeing. Denise solved that problem before he could speak. She turned to the parents and, in the same tone she used with 4th graders during fire drills, said, "Everyone to the parking lot. Quietly, right now. We are not crowding them." And because adults often obey a teacher's voice the same way children do, they moved. Within 2 minutes, the entire sideline had retreated, except for Ryan, Denise, Mark, and one older groundskeeper from the park, who had arrived with bolt cutters too late to matter. The field corner fell into a hush, broken only by a distant highway hum and the soft click of the loose flag against its pole. The mother bobcat stayed with the kitten, crouched close, one paw braced beside its body, eyes flicking from the humans to the fence line and back. She was not calm exactly. She was enduring. The animal control officer, Jenna Ruiz, arrived faster than anyone expected, probably because dispatch had finally understood that this was no longer just a wild animal near children call, but an active rescue. Jenna was in her 30s, compact, sun-browned, and had the sort of efficient, gentle manner common to people who handled frightened animals for a living. She listened to Ryan's explanation while studying the mother through binoculars from the end line. "You did the right thing," she said, which Ryan would remember longer than he expected. Then she focused fully on the bobcats. Foreleg strain, maybe compression, maybe minor cut. Mother's responsive. Best chance is still to let her move it on her own if she can. Jenna fetched a large folded moving blanket from her truck and, using a long pole, slid it in a wide arc across the grass until it rested a few feet from the mother and kitten. "Dry surface. Better grip," she murmured. No one else moved. The mother tensed but did not abandon the kitten. After a moment, she nudged it partly onto the blanket and resumed grooming. The kitten's breathing steadied. It even sat up for a few seconds before listing to one side. "That's good," Jenna said quietly. "Much better." Then slowly the mother tried again. This time she took the scruff higher, adjusted her jaw with extraordinary care, and lifted. The kitten cried only once. Its sore foreleg hung stiff but not twisted. The mother carried it 3 steps, set it down, licked the leg, and lifted again. She was solving the problem the only way she could. Short carries, pauses, reassessment. Jenna held one arm out to keep everyone still. "Let her work." And work she did, moving the kitten in stages across the corner of the field toward the widened fence gap. At the opening, she hesitated, perhaps judging the bent wire and narrow clearance. Ryan felt his whole body tighten. But then the mother lowered herself, back through the gap first, and carefully drew the kitten after her, by the scruff and shoulder, until both were on the drainage side again. Once in the brush, everything changed. She no longer paused so often. She carried the kitten through the scrub grass toward the pines, where the ground dipped and the field noise softened. At the tree line, she stopped and looked back. Ryan would later refuse to romanticize that moment. He was a coach, not a poet. He knew wild animals were not there to validate human ideas about nature. But he also knew what had happened. She had stayed at the corner flag all morning, in full view of parents, children, whistles, and parked cars, because her kitten was trapped and she had no other way left to force attention onto the broken fence. Whatever was in that backward glance, it held all of that. Then she turned and vanished into the pines with the kitten in her jaws. The field remained silent for several seconds after she disappeared. Then one of the younger players in the parking lot, who had apparently been watching from behind a minivan, despite explicit instructions, shouted, "Did the baby make it?" Ryan looked toward the trees and let out a long breath. "Yeah," he said, "I think it did." The game, unsurprisingly, did not start on time. Parents stood around in the lot speaking in hushed voices, as if they had all just witnessed something that did not belong in an ordinary Saturday. Children asked 100 questions at once. Jenna inspected the damaged fence and found that one of the lower tension ties had snapped clean, likely from a maintenance cart backing too close earlier in the week. The groundkeeper closed the corner with orange safety mesh until repairs could be made. Denise reorganized the warm-up routine for the opposite end of the field as though nothing impossible had happened, because someone had to restore normal life. Ryan found himself walking back once, just once, to the corner flag after the field had mostly reset. The grass still held the flattened imprint where the mother had crouched. The broken chain link sagged slightly in the morning breeze. Beyond it, the drainage strip looked ordinary again. By late afternoon, the story had spread through town. Some versions were already ridiculous. In one, the bobcat had marched right up to the coach and asked for help. In another, it had blocked kickoff by sitting on the ball. Ryan ignored all of it. When the league director called to ask what exactly had happened, he gave the plainest possible account. A mother bobcat kept returning to the field corner. "We found a broken fence. Her kitten was trapped in it." That was enough. It was the truth, and truth did not need embellishment. 3 days later, Jenna sent him a motion camera image from the drainage woods beyond the park. In the grainy dawn light of the infrared frame, an adult bobcat moved through brush with 2 kittens. One was smaller and held its foreleg a little stiffly, but it was walking. Ryan stared at the image for a long time in the school parking lot before forwarding it to Denise, who replied only, "Told you she stayed for a reason." After that, Maple Ridge Parks repaired more than just the fence corner. They checked the entire perimeter, replaced old tension bars, and installed finer lower mesh in the gaps nearest the drainage strip. The Youth League added a new field inspection step before weekend games. Parents kept telling the story long after the season ended, and Ryan, whenever he walked the end line past that same orange corner flag, found himself looking once toward the pines, half expecting to see a lean spotted shape waiting where grass met chain link. He never did. But every now and then, on bright mornings when children laughed by the benches and the field looked as ordinary as any field anywhere, he remembered how a wild mother had stood at the corner flag and refused to leave because, behind a broken stretch of chain link, something small still needed to be seen. And because she stayed long enough in the most visible corner of the whole field, someone finally looked down instead of past.